exactly 9 months ago. This broadcast opened at the scene of the Palisades Fire, one of the most destructive wildfires in Los Angeles history.
After a months-long investigation, officials have now arrested a man they say is responsible for California's deadly Palisades Fire.
They say the evidence includes images generated by artificial intelligence and a question from the suspect to ChatGPT.
There's a 29-year-old man sitting in federal custody right now who, according to authorities, is responsible for one of the most catastrophic disasters in Los Angeles history. 12 people lost their lives, over 6,800 structures, homes where families built memories, businesses that supported communities were completely destroyed. More than 1,000 additional buildings sustained serious damage, and it all allegedly started with one person, one fire, and one haunting digital image created months before any flames appeared. Jonathan, a resident of Melbourne, Florida, was arrested by federal agents in connection with the Palisades Fire that devastated Los Angeles earlier this year. But here's what makes this case particularly chilling. Investigators say the evidence trail includes a dystopian AI-generated image he created months before the incident, a painting showing a burning forest with crowds fleeing from flames. That image, created using ChatGPT, is now part of the federal criminal complaint against him. The fire didn't start on January 7th when the world watched the Palisades burn. According to federal prosecutors, it actually began a week earlier on New Year's Day, as a smaller blaze that smoldered underground in dense vegetation and root structures for days before weather conditions caused it to explode into the inferno that shocked the world. What follows is the story of how federal investigators pieced together digital evidence, geolocation data, witness testimony, and forensic analysis to build a case against someone who allegedly watched his own handiwork destroy an entire community. And the details of that investigation reveal just how much digital footprints can tell authorities about intentions, movements, and actions. The federal complaint against Jonathan is supported by what prosecutors call a comprehensive collection of digital evidence that painted a disturbing picture of premeditation and intent. Among the most striking pieces, a ChatGPT-generated image created months before the Palisades incident. The AI-produced artwork depicts a burning forest with crowds of people fleeing from flames, a dystopian scene that prosecutors say bears an eerie resemblance to what would later unfold in Pacific Palisades. But the digital trail goes far deeper than one haunting image. Investigators recovered extensive data from Jonathan's cell phone that placed him at specific locations at critical times. Geolocation data showed his movements throughout the evening of December 31st and early morning hours of January 1st with precision that left little room for alternative explanations. His iPhone contained videos he recorded that night, footage taken from a hilltop near where investigators believe the initial blaze began. The metadata from those videos provided timestamps and exact coordinates that became crucial to building the timeline. Perhaps most damning, the music he was listening to during those crucial hours. According to the complaint, Jonathan had been repeatedly listening to a specific rap song in the days leading up to January 1st. The music video for that song featured objects being set ablaze. Investigators documented that he listened to this song and watched the accompanying video multiple times in the period immediately before the incident. When authorities interviewed Jonathan on January 24th, prosecutors say he lied about his location when he first observed the initial blaze. He claimed to be near the bottom of a hiking trail, but geolocation data from his phone told a different story. He was standing above the flames, approximately 30 feet from the growing fire as it rapidly expanded. According to the federal complaint, here's what investigators believe happened during those critical hours between New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. Jonathan worked an evening shift as an Uber driver on December 31st. Two of his passengers that night later told authorities that he appeared noticeably agitated and angry during their rides, a detail that would take on significance as investigators reconstructed the evening's events. After dropping off his final passenger in Pacific Palisades, Jonathan parked his vehicle and attempted to contact a former friend. When that attempt apparently failed, he exited his car and walked up a nearby trail, specifically what authorities identified as near the Stowell Rock trailhead in the mountainous area above Pacific Palisades. At the hilltop location, he recorded iPhone videos of the area while listening to that rap song whose music video featured objects being ignited. At 12 minutes past midnight, just 12 minutes into the new year, environmental sensing platforms detected that a blaze had started in that exact area. Jonathan then attempted to contact 911 to report the fire, though it took him several tries to get through. After initially fleeing the scene in his vehicle, he turned around after passing fire engines heading in the opposite direction to fight the flames. And here's where his behavior becomes particularly suspicious, according to investigators. While the fire burned and firefighters worked to suppress it, Jonathan walked back up the same trail he'd been on earlier that night. He positioned himself to watch both the fire and the firefighters responding to it, using his iPhone to record short videos of the scene. Firefighters successfully suppressed the visible flames that night. Case closed, right? Not even close. Here's the part of his story that transforms it from a relatively contained incident into a catastrophe. The fire didn't actually go out. Firefighters suppressed the visible blaze on January 1st, but the fire continued to smolder and burn underground within the root structure of the dense vegetation in the area. For nearly a week, that underground fire burned undetected, gradually spreading through interconnected root systems beneath the surface while showing no obvious signs above ground. Then on January 7th, weather conditions shifted dramatically. High winds and extremely dry conditions created the perfect environment for that smoldering underground fire to reemerge and spread rapidly above ground. What became known as the Palisades Fire exploded across the landscape with terrifying speed. Residents who had gone to bed in their homes woke to evacuation orders as flames raced through neighborhoods. The iconic Pacific Coast Highway along Malibu, normally a picturesque coastal route, transformed into what witnesses described as resembling a war zone. Families fled through smoke-filled streets. Cherished homes where generations of memories had been created turned to ash and rubble within hours. 12 people ultimately lost their lives. Over 6,800 structures were completely destroyed, not damaged, but reduced to foundations and debris. More than 1,000 additional buildings sustained significant damage. Thousands of residents were forced to evacuate, many with only minutes to gather essential belongings before fleeing.
Jonathan Vigliotti has reported extensively on those Los Angeles wildfires, and he leads us off tonight.
The scale and complexity of the investigation into the Palisades Fire is difficult to overstate. This wasn't a straightforward case with obvious evidence and willing witnesses. This required piecing together a massive puzzle using cutting-edge forensic techniques, exhaustive physical evidence collection, and painstaking digital analysis. The ATF's National Response Team, an elite unit of certified fire investigators, electrical and fire protection engineers, chemists, accelerant detection canine teams, and other specialists, arrived on scene within 24 hours of the Los Angeles City Fire Department requesting assistance. Over the following 8 months, investigators processed hundreds of acres of fire-damaged terrain, examining every inch of the burn area for the smallest potential clues. They conducted hundreds of interviews with witnesses, emergency responders, and anyone who might have information relevant to the investigation. They pursued more than 200 separate investigative leads. The evidence collection was staggering in scope. More than 13,000 items were gathered, including fire debris samples, digital data from multiple sources, and DNA samples. All of this material was analyzed at ATF's state-of-the-art forensic laboratory facilities. Investigators carried out over 500 distinct scientific tests using the nation's only large-scale fire science laboratory dedicated specifically to fire investigations. More than 10 top engineers and support staff contributed to the laboratory analysis alone. The technical surveillance work was equally exhaustive. Specialists reviewed approximately 2.5 million phone records and data extracted from various digital evidence sources, a monumental task that required sophisticated software and experienced analysts to identify relevant patterns and connections.
9-month-long investigation. Investigators telling us they combed through more than 13,000 pieces of evidence.
The investigation ultimately produced more than 300 ATF reports, including a single 200-page document detailing just the origin and cause determination. That level of documentation reflects both the complexity of the case and the thoroughness authorities applied to ensure their conclusions could withstand legal scrutiny. Jonathan is charged under federal law with destruction of property by means of fire, specifically the malicious destruction of real property owned by an organization receiving federal financial assistance. This is a serious felony under federal statute. If convicted, he faces a mandatory minimum sentence of 5 years in federal prison. The maximum potential sentence is 20 years in federal custody. He was arrested near his Florida residence and made his initial court appearance in federal court in Orlando, where proceedings to transfer him back to California for trial will begin. Acting U.S. Attorney Bill Essayli emphasized during the announcement that the complaint contains allegations and that Jonathan is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. That presumption of innocence is a bedrock principle of the American justice system, regardless of how compelling prosecutors believe their evidence to be. But if the evidence is as strong as authorities suggest, digital footprints, geolocation data, witness statements, forensic analysis, and that eerie AI-generated image created months before the incident, Jonathan faces an uphill battle in defending against these charges. Beyond the statistics, the 12 lives lost, the nearly 7,000 structures destroyed, the thousands evacuated, lies the immeasurable human cost of what occurred. Families lost homes that held generations of memories, children's artwork, wedding photos, heirlooms passed down through families, all reduced to ash. Small business owners who had spent decades building their enterprises watched them burn to nothing in hours. Entire neighborhoods where people had raised children, celebrated holidays, and built community connections simply ceased to exist in recognizable form. The psychological trauma extends across the entire Los Angeles community. Survivors who escaped the flames now deal with the complex grief of losing everything while feeling guilty for surviving when others didn't. First responders who worked heroically to save lives and property carry the weight of what they witnessed. And hanging over all of it is the question that prosecutors now claim to have answered. Was this preventable? If Jonathan is indeed responsible as charged, then 12 people died and thousands lost their homes, not because of an accident, not because of natural causes, but because of one person's alleged actions on New Year's Day. So here's where this case stands. A 29-year-old man sits in federal custody, charged with igniting a fire that investigators say smoldered underground for a week before exploding into one of the most destructive incidents in Los Angeles history. The evidence against him reportedly includes AI-generated artwork depicting burning forests created months before any flames appeared, geolocation data placing him at the fire's origin point, videos he recorded that night, lies he allegedly told investigators, and his behavior of returning to watch the fire he's accused of starting. The investigation spanned 8 months, involved hundreds of personnel, processed over 13,000 pieces of evidence, conducted 500 scientific tests, and reviewed 2.5 million phone records. If convicted, Jonathan faces between 5 and 20 years in federal prison, but no sentence can rebuild the 6,800 structures that were destroyed. No conviction can bring back the 12 lives that were lost. No justice system can restore what was taken from thousands of families who lost everything. Authorities have established a dedicated email address for victims and witnesses to contact the ATF Witness Assistance Program. As the case proceeds through the federal court system, those affected by the Palisades Fire will watch closely, hoping that accountability, if Jonathan is indeed responsible, provides at least some measure of closure to a tragedy that never should have happened.